Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while we heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Welcome to episode 2 of Sober Psychology. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. If you listened to the very first episode where we introduced the podcast, thank you so very much. I gave you a little testimony myself, gave you an idea of this podcast and where we're hoping it can go, how it started, all of that. But today we're here to explain addiction. Now, if you listened to the first episode, I went over the fact that I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm someone who's been through rehab. I'm someone who's worked with addicts and alcoholics, and this is what my life purpose is. I want to continue to give what was so freely given to me. I want to help people out of the struggle of addiction. I want to give them the solution, but also as someone who is pursuing a master's in psychology, I want to be able to help people in the realm of mental health. So the idea of this, as you can see in the slogans, I'm sure you're going to hear over and over again, is I'm here to recover out loud so fewer people have to suffer in silence. Again, today we're going to explain addiction. This is something that I feel like everybody is owed. If you are someone who struggles with substance abuse, if you're someone who knows somebody who does, if you've questioned whether or not you are someone who is moving into that realm of probably using or drinking a little bit too much and you're having a hard time separating from it, hopefully we can answer those questions today. And again, as always, social media's all over the place. Look up Sober Psychology, reach out. We could talk about it. We could rap about it and figure it out. But today, I can only do what I'm uniquely qualified to do, the only area where I actually have any type of say so in, and that is addiction and alcoholism. I'm coming out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. As you can see, if you're watching the video, all of these pages are just torn up. I just have highlights and notes everywhere because when I was going through rehab, when I was looking for the answer, this book, although it is not the Bible, it's not a replacement for the Bible. It is a tool, it is a weapon, it is an option for you to grab the flimsy reed and to be able to navigate the treacherous waters of addiction and recovery. So I'm going to try and stick to my notes as best I can. I'm making no promises because I like to babble on and on and on, which is probably why we started a podcast. But we're going to break it down for you. The first thing is simple question: what is alcoholism and addiction? I'm going to give you the actual definition that Webster gives you. Alcoholism is an addiction to the consumption of alcoholic liquor or the mental illness and compulsive behavior resulting from alcohol dependency. And a key thing here is that right off the rip, they're calling alcoholism an addiction. It's an addiction to the consumption of liquor or the mental illness. It's another key phrase that I highlighted: mental illness and, not or, but and compulsive behavior. All right. So hang on to that. Alcoholism is the addiction to liquor, mental illness, and compulsive behavior. We'll come back to that in a second. The definition for addiction: the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. Now, in my mind, what I went ahead and highlighted was being addicted, substance, thing, or activity. An addiction doesn't just look like a substance that you're abusing, right? So for an alcoholic or addict, just to give you a breakdown of this, an alcoholic or addict, we understand, especially if you're going through AA, the book of Alcoholics Anonymous was written for people who were alcoholics because at the time, this was in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, that there was such a stigma on drug use. There wasn't as much as you see today. Drugs weren't as easily accessible. They were around, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you had the majority of your drugs being opium. You had drugs that there weren't street drugs that were as popular as they are today. Today, it's so easy to get them. There's so many different ways that you can consume drugs. Alcohol was really the biggest problem from the public's eye, right? So as someone who goes through AA, we see alcoholism and addiction interchangeable. And the reason that we see it that way is, like, for instance, my background, I'm a drinker, right? I drank and drank and drank and couldn't stop. However, if I were to take pills instead, the result would be the same. Same thing goes for someone who their substance abuse problem comes from pills. If they were to stop doing pills and drink alcohol and replace it, they would do the same thing. It comes down to a mental issue. We're going to talk about that again later too, but saying that alcoholism and addiction are interchangeable when it comes to being a genuine alcoholic and addict. Now, an alcoholic or an addict typically is qualified by two questions from the book of AA. So if you have a big book, and at the very beginning of the chapter in We Agnostics, which is going to be on page 44, there are two qualifying questions. Now, the interesting part about AA now is pretty much anybody can go to meetings. There are open meetings all over the place, but these used to be closed, right? So it used to be a little bit more exclusive in the sense that you had to be qualified before you were coming in to an AA meeting. This is a big deal, right? So the two qualifying questions, they're going to be in that very first chapter, but I think it's the third sentence. If, when you honestly want to, here's the first one, you find you cannot quit entirely, so you cannot quit, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount that you take. So that's basically like call in my numbers. Again, going back to my personal experience, at the beginning, when I started drinking in college, we would drink once a month, maybe twice a month. We'd all hang out and, of course we're getting drunk, but that's it. I would, go to school, go to work, go throughout my daily life, and that I'd never really thought about it. It was just a fun thing to do on weekends. As it progressed, because this is a progressive illness, again, we're going to continue talking about this. So a lot of what we're talking about now, you'll be able to have elaborated on a little bit more later on in a couple more episodes, but this is a progressive illness, right? So when I first started drinking, it was, once, twice a month. Then it became every weekend, and then it became during the week, and then it got to the point where I couldn't go to parties because I was drinking two times what everybody else was drinking, and I was embarrassed, so I would go and sneak it and hide it, or I would just be the guy who's getting plastered and vomiting in the front yard and all this kind of stuff. And in college, you're in that culture, you're in that atmosphere. Everybody's in their 20s, everybody's partying, people are starting to have jobs where they can have a little bit of money and, go spend it, and nobody's really holding you accountable, right? I went to a college where it's right across the street from my high school. I stayed in my hometown, but a lot of my friends, they came from out of town. So there wasn't any family. There weren't any friends. There weren't any people that were going to go back and report to your local pastor, to your family, to whatever. So it's party time, right? That's why college presents such that party atmosphere. But I realized very quickly that I couldn't stop after a certain point. It turned into me getting alcohol and then isolating myself, coming home and polishing off a bottle every night until I passed out, and then wake up and start the day, do it again. And a lot of this was in the shadows, I guess, if you will, because I didn't want to tell people how bad it had gotten. I wasn't even thinking about how bad it was gotten. It was gotten. I wasn't even thinking about how bad it had gotten. I was thinking more along the lines of more of that hedonistic mentality. This is what I want. I want to cut loose. I want to forget. I want to escape my problems. So then the drinking took off the way it was. So I couldn't stop, right? I couldn't stay stopped. And that even transfers into like DWI, right? I got my first DWI in 2019, and it's my only DWI, even though I should have had much more. And I kid you not, within the day of me getting released from jail, I was drinking again. So even a DWI, even legal problems wasn't enough to stop me. Same thing goes when I got my assault charge. It was because, it wasn't because I was drinking, but obviously drinking elevates it. But I got out, and it was, I think, a full day of me not drinking. And then the next day I was drinking. You just got accused of a felony, and here we are. We're going to go right back to drinking. So that's where that problem really starts to show. The other qualifying question is, can you call your numbers, right? So this is another one where it got to that point where I just could not tell you that I was going to sit down and have 3 or 4 beers. I couldn't go watch a football game with all my buddies and only have 3 or 4 drinks, because I'm going to be the guy that's finding out ways to get more and more and more. And then even when the game's over and I'm probably drunk at this point, I'm going to go home and drink more. So it got to the point where I couldn't tell you what my limit was going to be. My limit was until I wasn't conscious. And as a high functioning alcoholic, that means that you're drinking way more than what your body should be handling. So these are 2 qualifying questions just to keep in the back of your mind. I know that I know that when I got out of rehab and I went to visit my family, and I don't have anybody else, especially my mom's side, I think, that struggles with addiction or alcoholism. So when I'm trying to explain to them what my experience was like, of course, they start bringing up stories of, well, I know so and so, and he used to drink every weekend in high school. And this is someone who probably doesn't drink nearly that much anymore, probably has a family and a job and all this kind of stuff. But because they know that that person drank more than they did, they automatically assume they have a problem. It's one of those ideas, especially in our society, where we use the term alcoholism or an addict and we throw it around way too loosely, in my opinion. Just because someone is drinking, they may be a heavy drinker. We'll also get to that a little bit later, but they may not be an addict or an alcoholic, right? So these are things that, if anybody wants to reach out to me, we could talk about and we can help kind of qualify the situation, I guess, if you will. But these are ones to reflect on, right? If once I stop, can I stay stopped? And when I do choose to drink, can I call my numbers and just keep it at that? Can I just say I'm just gonna drink a bottle of wine tonight? Okay. Can I stop at that bottle of wine, or does it turn into more and more and more? Do I wake up in the morning with that fever on me, like I have to have more? And this is where you really want to dig in. And then we're going to take it to the next point, where this is kind of a step one presentation. It's not the full step one presentation, but this is what we'll do in rehab, at least the one that I learned from, where when we have family day, this is after you've gotten through a certain amount of time or a certain amount of steps within the program, your family can come visit you, right? And that's a tough one for most people, because you now have this moniker, this idea, this understanding that I'm different. I have alcoholism, and it doesn't go away. This is an incurable disease that lasts a lifetime. But it's tough to explain that to people. Normal people will just say, okay, well, if the problem happens, if your legal issues occur while you're drinking, if you get angry when you drink, if you get super depressed when you drink, why don't you just stop drinking? And I would love for it to be that easy, but I'm here to tell you that it's not. So this is where it comes down to this step one presentation of trying to explain it. Now, we're not going to get super in depth to this. Maybe we'll do a later episode, and maybe we'll have a series of episodes where we're actually working through the steps. But this is at the very beginning of the book. It's the forward to the first edition. And it says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." So, right off the bat, it's letting you know that this is not just a body issue. This is not just me drinking and that's the problem. It's a mind issue as well. So, the problem is going to center in my mind rather than my body. Now, my body, there are a lot of different ways to talk about this. There are a lot of theories out there. Scientists have been working on it, especially lately, which I'm really excited about. Again, it's kind of cool. I've been sober since February of 2021, and during that journey, I've gotten back into school, going into psychology. So, as someone who's recovered, you start to look at the scientific side of it, because I'm also trying to become a psychologist. And it's fascinating how more people are paying attention to this now. It's slowly but surely becoming less stigmatized. But as far as the science is concerned, there's no real conclusive evidence on how an addict becomes an addict. Now, my dad's an alcoholic, and I'm pretty sure that a couple of the people on his side of the family are alcoholics. You could say that it's because we're very Irish. You could say whatever you want. There are certain chemicals and molecules in your brain that tend to be hereditary traits that have a higher propensity of being someone who can become an alcoholic. But at the end of the day, what does it matter? Who cares, right? I'm not going to solve the equation. I'm not going to solve the problem, and I'm not going to outthink alcoholism. Because again, as we just read in the forward to the first edition, from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Okay. That's an important part, right? So the mind part of it, that's going to be the obsession. That's going to be me trying to escape my problems. That's going to be the manic behavior, as it said in the definition of alcoholism, very compulsive behavior, mental illness. The idea of it is, and this is one thing that has settled with me, especially from rehab, is that my mind is constantly trying to kill me and make it look like an accident. It's very difficult to explain to like my mom, who's not an alcoholic or an addict, but to tell her that this is a constant struggle. And even someone who's in sobriety, even someone who's been sober for a long time, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys that it's easy. I struggle. I struggle a lot. I wouldn't say every single day, but even though I have more than a perfect life. I mean, again, 5 years ago I was living in my truck. Now I own a home. I'm married. I have a baby on the way. I have more than I could ever imagine. And there are days where it's so crippling and it's so tough, it's so scary and dark that I just don't know if I'm going to be able to make it without a drink. And again, we'll get into that, but it's difficult. It doesn't go away. This isn't easy. And it sounds for people who aren't addicts and alcoholics, it's hard for them to understand. You sound like you're being a baby. You sound like you're whining, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, this is going to be centering in my mind. Okay. So this is where that step one presentation comes in. We may be able to do that one day, but I'm going to get into page 30 and 31, and I'm just going to read you excerpts from it, and maybe it'll help trigger something in your head where you can ask questions. Again, blow me up on social media, reach out to me by email, whatever you want to do. But most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Now, I want to break this up and talk about that. That's one thing that I struggle with a lot. I constantly worry about relapse, right? I know that the way that I am and the way that it ended up before I got sober, if I go back to drinking, I bet you right now I could go to the gas station, I can grab a six pack, I could sit down and I can enjoy it and stop right there. I bet right now I could. But because I did that, I can promise you that when I wake up the next morning, there's going to be some type of fever pitch that's on me. I'm going to be thinking about it nonstop. It's going to get me to this phase of the panic that sets in, like when you're the way that I describe it is like imagine your phone and how addicted we are to our phones, right? Now imagine that you go somewhere, you leave the house, you leave your phone at home. Every single time that you think about your phone, I wonder if somebody texted me. I need to look this up. I need to find these directions. Anything, anytime that that phone crosses your mind, that's what it's like to have alcoholism and addiction. It's a just constant fever. And then this panic sets in. What if somebody's calling me? They're trying to get in touch with me. I can't get to it. What if it's, it's crazy and it's very manic for people who don't understand it. It's a very scary state of mind for those who don't fully understand what alcoholism or addiction is. I know that I didn't, and that was one of the reasons that I was ready to take my own life, is because it got so bad that I didn't really have anybody define alcoholism for me, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't stop. It was such a simple concept to just not drink. And I would do crazy things too. I would go like I would, I'd go run, which is pretty normal. I'd play video games. I'd watch a movie. I'd start writing. I'd do any little thing that I could. I had the rubber band on my wrist. I had all these little things where I was like, anytime I think about it, I'm just gonna attack. Like I'm gonna attack myself and hope that that thought goes away. It never does. It gets worse and builds and builds and builds to before you even know it. It's like blinking, right? You're across the street, you're at the liquor store. I intentionally got an apartment across the street from a liquor store, by the way. You might have a problem if you're getting to that point. if if your real estate investment opportunities exist within the radius of a liquor store, you may have an issue. But this is the obsession that it's talking about, and the idea that we can control and enjoy our drinking is one of the greatest obsessions that we're going to deal with as alcoholics and addicts, right? The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. Okay, and so let's go into insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? So you're in this mindset. I would intentionally put myself in situations where I knew that I wanted to drink. I'd go out. I'd say I'm not going to have a drink, but I'd still go out to the bar. I would say that I'm going to do something healthy today instead of drinking and sitting around moping. But I would put myself in my apartment all by myself, knowing full well that I had enough time before 9 o'clock hit and the liquor store shut down. And so this obsession starts to build, and then the idea that I'm gonna control this drinking. It's been bad all 400 times before, but this is going to be different this time. And that insanity builds. You get so tired of living that way, and can't understand why you can't stop. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. And this is a big one for me. The thing that I like about the big book, the thing that I like about the Bible, the thing that I like about the experiences that I've had in life is that I try not to leave a lot of room for gray area, right? There are certain things, sure, we could argue on that, but it's either yes or no. Like for me as a Christian, God's either everything or he's nothing. Okay. And it says that in the big book. It alludes to that in the Bible. I mean, God's either everything or he's not. There's no such thing as a coincidence. There's no such thing as as this same thing that keeps popping up. It's like, oh, that must be a message. It's probably just a coincidence. No, stop throwing that away. And the same idea goes with anything that you try and find gray areas for. Because for me, the way that I think and the way that I am, if you give me a gray area, I'm going to exploit it and I'm going to use it for my good. If you tell me that there are non-negotiables, that this is it. Like it's an absolute, right? And so for me, I don't care if they come out. I do care if they come out with a cure for alcoholism and addiction, but I can't pursue that till my death. I just have to accept the fact that I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink anymore. So what do I do for the rest of my life? Do I whine about it? Am I going to bitch and moan until someone comes up with something? Or am I going to accept the fact that I can't drink? I'm going to put myself in those situations where it may be awkward. I've already not been invited to weddings before. I've already not been invited out with friends because they drink and I don't. Okay, if that's the way that they want to perceive me, I don't have control over that. But the reality for me is that I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink. I can't do it. I made that very clear to my wife when we were dating. Like, you drink. You do your thing. You do whatever you want, but I'm letting you know that I don't and I can't and I won't. And if I have any type of gray area in that, if I think to myself, oh, well, if I have 3 years of sobriety, I should be good to just sit down one weekend and have a couple of drinks, then I'm going to die. This will kill me. Again, going back to it, my mind's trying to kill me and make it look like an accident. I'll make excuses until I can't anymore, right? This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we were like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. I mean, that's clear cut. There is no gray area in that. I'm going to read that all together one more time for you. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. There's no negotiating that. There's no trying to convince yourself that you can take a week or a month, whatever time you create, away from the substance, and then all of a sudden it's going to get better. Then you can go right back. How many of you who actually know that you're alcoholics or addicts, or those of you who struggle with it, how many of you have actually stepped away when it got really bad, when things were getting rough? How many of you have actually stepped away, had a length of sobriety, whether it be a week, whether it be a year, and then when you went back to it, it was okay? If that's the case for you, you're not an addict or alcoholic. Okay? If you're an addict or alcoholic, when you go back to it, it's 10 times worse every time. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. It does not get better. Okay? So you have to smash this delusion that you're going to be okay with it. And now I know this is tough, okay? This is a little quote that I put down in the notes too. No one gets sober unless they want to. Not if you beg them, not if you shame them, not if you use reason, emotion, or tough love. There's only one thing that makes someone get sober: their own realization that they need to do it. Okay. I told you again a little bit about my story. The only reason that I went to rehab is because I was sitting in county jail and we were on about night 3, and I had begged my mom, please get me out of here, post my bail. I had accused her, I had been mean to her, all this kind of stuff while I'm sitting in jail for problems that were caused from me drinking too much and acting like a fool, going back to the definition with that compulsive behavior. And she said that she'll get me out of jail if I go to rehab. So the whole time I'm at rehab, and the whole first month I was at rehab, I was just bullshitting everybody. Yeah, I'm just going to do this just to get it over with, just so I can go back to drinking. Like it's this, I can't do it. Every time I went back to it, it got worse and worse and worse. I went for a decade of drinking and didn't have a whole lot of problems. Then all of a sudden I'm cheating on my wife. I'm being abusive to my wife. I'm I'm getting DWIs. I'm getting assault charges. I'm contemplating my own suicide, and this reality sets in, and yet I'm not willing to take a harsh look at it. I don't have a problem I just am in a weird phase in my life. I'm just real stressed out. I've just been real tired. No, I have a freaking problem. And until I'm willing to admit that, as it says, this is the step one aspect of it. Until I'm willing to admit that and realize that I have to do this if I want to survive, if I want to stop hurting people, if I want to start causing chaos, I have to just stop. So until I get to that point, I'm never going to get better, right? This centers in the mind. It's not in the body. This is if you continue to listen, you're going to realize this is a mental issue that we're dealing with here. Okay? So here are some common temperaments, all right? If any of these resonate with you, hang in there with me. Now these aren't foolproof, right? This is like everybody has these temperaments, but these run rampant in alcoholics and addicts' lives, drunk or sober, right? They're very passive aggressive, just kind of ignore things, won't whatever. Impulsive, sensation seeking. That's that hedonistic lifestyle we're talking about. I'm going to go screw every woman I can because that little moment that I get makes me happy. Or the pursuit of a female makes me happy. I know she's bad for me. I know I'm not building this on a firm foundation. I mean, it makes me feel good, right? I'm going to work out too much. That's another one too. Some guys get really addicted to gym life and I get that. Like, I think working out's great. I love working out, but it's this, when it becomes an obsessive habit, right? It's this sensation seeking. I'm only seeking sensations to make me feel better. It's like putting the needle in the arm. I'm just going for the next high, right? Very dependent. We act like we have our shit together, and some of us can. Like, there for a while I did, but I'm very dependent. I've always been dependent on my ex-wife or a girlfriend or my family, or somebody's got to always help me out. I don't have this independent mindset because I don't believe in myself and I don't like myself, right? Very anxious all the time. And this looks different, but results in the same thing. Like addicts, you tend to have them be a little bit more hyped up, a little bit more jazzed up because they're all, whatever. Alcoholics are just boring, mellow, drunk, but then they have those moments where, especially when you haven't had to drink for a while, you get all hyped up, right? Very anxious, psychopathological, just this constantly trying to play mind games, these very weird ways of seeing things and thinking about things, very depressed. So alcohol does a lot of weird things to the brain. So does any substance abuse, right? Substances just affect your body differently, but alcohol will literally alter the chemicals in your brain. And that's a very scary thing you have to pay attention to. This is one of those things that I know is very difficult for a lot of people. For me, it was difficult because I started surrounding myself with people who drink as much as I do. I surrounded myself with people who wanted to party as hard as I did. I surrounded myself, at first it was in college and going out and having fun. And then when I got older, and it turned into poker nights, it turned into watching football games. It turned any little thing. I used to have drinking games when Game of Thrones was airing on TV. I'd have people over and we'd have drinking games for Game of Thrones. I'd have people over to watch Harry Potter movies because I had a drinking game to go with it. It didn't matter what it was. I was surrounding myself with people. I played disc golf a lot. I played real golf a lot. All of these things were centered around having people who would drink with me. I was plastered all the time. I just wouldn't stop. I was always looking for an excuse. Anytime I went on a vacation, I had to go bar hopping at every vacation I was at. I couldn't just enjoy where I was at. I had to be drunk. I had to have a drink in my hand. And still to this day, as a recovered guy, I still have to have a drink in my hand, or feel like I have to have it. It's like a comfort thing for me, right? Which I catch myself on a lot. I drink an energy drink or coffee or, water. Like, I feel uncomfortable if I don't have, especially when I'm talking to people, if I don't have something I'm sipping on. If I'm out in the garage and I'm working on something, I gotta have there's something, some type of can, some type of something to hold nearby where I can just drink out of. And that's a weird thing. It, like, your brain starts to just be altered by these chemicals that you're putting into your body. You act very irrationally. It's a tough cycle for sure to be in. And so that is what I would say is probably one of the more difficult things to start adjusting, right? Start tweaking things. If you know that every time you go hang out with a group of friends, you end up coming home drunk, try to not go hang out with that group of friends a couple times. Find a group of friends that do something else that you like. I would, as a Christian, again, I would suggest church friends, see if you can go do something positive. See if you can go fishing with a buddy without drinking. Go play a round of golf. Don't drink a beer. Like, these things start to get you in routines and habits that are a little bit better. And if you're not an alcoholic and addict, and that obsession hasn't kicked in, then you should be good. You just have to have that consistency. You have to have that backbone to where you just want to stop. You want to develop these better habits. And then you have your heavy drinkers and users. Now, this one's a tough one for me, right? Because again, we go back to talking about how all of the delusions and all of the mindset where we could figure this thing out has to be smashed. I'm either an alcoholic or I'm not. But a heavy drinker and user may be someone like I would probably consider my stepdad this in certain phases of his life where he'll, every weekend he's drinking and he's getting drunk. Well, and that's probably brought on by a lot of stress at work. Well, he's not an alcoholic or an addict. So for him, that lasts for like a month, maybe 2 months, and then he could go without touching alcohol. If you took it all away from him and dumped it out in the sink, he's not going to freak out and go to the liquor store and buy more. He's going to be upset, sure, but it's not going to completely alter his life in a way like it would mine. Like for me, when I moved out here, I moved away from the town where I got all of my legal charges, and I moved out with my family just to try and get back on my feet, going back to the personality as the common temperaments, which is dependency. And it didn't take one night. I think it was one night, and I immediately started raiding liquor cabinets. My parents had wine bottles because they're not big wine drinkers. They had wine bottles from early 2000s, late 90s, and I was just drinking wine. I was drinking anything they had. I burned through the tequila. They had a clear bottle of tequila, and I drank all of that, and then I filled it back up with water. Then they had a whiskey bottle. I cleared through that. I filled it up with sweet tea. Like I was just like, that's not normal behavior, right? That's an alcoholic addict. Heavy drinkers and users, you could toy around with it because whether or not you're born with alcoholism, if you want to, whatever side of the argument you want to be on, it does develop. So obviously, if you're born an alcoholic and addict, but yet you never have alcohol or drugs, you're never going to figure it out, right? Like it's not going to just take on. You have to feed the beast. You have to constantly be throwing in gas to that fire. And that's a very difficult thing to talk about too in a short episode, but all in all, just a recap. So we have our alcoholism and addiction. If you're an alcoholic or an addict, you have an addiction to the consumption of alcoholic liquor or the mental illness and compulsive behavior resulting from alcohol dependency. If you have an addiction, it's the factor condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. We're talking about substance abuse right now. So those two definitions are interchangeable. You have the reality that your mind is trying to kill you and make it look like an accident. You have the qualifying questions where can you call your number? Can you call how many drinks you're going to have and stop there? And once you stop, can you stay stopped? Okay. Then we understand that it's centering in the mind, not the body, right? We went over the little step one presentation, and that's a reality for a lot of people. This is also the big book there are writings in here from a doctor, Dr. Silkworth, and we're going to get into that in later episodes as well, but he has a lot of very early knowledge. He dealt with Bill W., who is the author of this book, and Bill's story is incredible. That's chapter 1 in the book, but Dr. Silkworth brings a lot of really cool perspective to it because he's not an alcoholic or addict. He was trying to treat this man, and he started realizing a whole lot of patterns and situations, things that he was seeing in a lot of other people who were struggling with this alcohol dependency. We're talking about withdrawals and stuff too, which we'll get into later on. But the reality of it is, if I have any idea, if I have any delusion that I'm going to be able to drink like normal people, as someone who is an alcoholic, I can't have that. I have to completely smash it. I'm not going to be able to drink like other people. I don't even need to drink anymore. Like I don't even need to have the idea in my head that I'm going to drink one day again, like normal people. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it, or else I'm going to go back into the same pattern, right? This is a mind thing, which this is why this is a mental health podcast, is because alcoholism and addiction is not just the physical condition where you're needing something, right? It's the mental aspect of it all. And we're going to get into a lot of this later on. I promise you guys we're going to go in depth. But again, I appreciate you all for hanging out. I would love to have open conversation about this. So if anybody wants to reach out, the email, I'll put it all in the show notes, but the email's soberpsychology@gmail.com. Go check us out. We're going to have TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Also Facebook. I'm trying to have a broad platform so anybody can communicate. If you have ideas, If you have arguments, if you have disagreements, that's cool. I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to see your side of it, and we could put it in the episode. We can talk about it there. If you're struggling or you know someone who is, send them this way. I'd love to be able to talk. Again, I'm not the cure all for everybody, but I know people who can help, right? So feel free to follow me on socials. Feel free to spread the word. Reach out if you have the capacity and go and be of service to somebody. All right. If you're struggling with addiction, you're struggling with the idea of suicide, you're struggling with depression, I'm here for you. I am. I've been there. I've been in those shoes. I still struggle with a lot of things. I'm not perfect. I'm not polished. Don't have it figured out, but I'm working on it. Right. So, again, just remember this is progress, not perfection. Keep your head up. Keep your heart open. See you next time.